Let's bring in BHP CEO Mike Henry. BHP is the largest mining company in the world and a leading producer of copper, iron ore, and metallurgical coal. Copper has recently hit its highest level since late July and is an essential element in AI data centers, EVs, and more. And Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start, I guess, with copper. I mean, the price acts like, this is a demand-driven story and might last for a little while. Obviously, a lot of issues around maybe adding supply. So talk about the setup there and how you see it going for your business.
So you mentioned in the opening there AI. And this is a really exciting story for the copper industry in particular, because all of these data centers are very copper intensive. And so on the demand side of the equation, you've got the traditional drivers of growth, population growth, overall growth in the economy. But you add to that the energy transition, data centers, and we're seeing a compounding of copper demand growth. So we're expecting demand to grow by up to 70% by 2050. Against that backdrop, you've got it becoming harder and harder to find new copper deposits. And so BHP is in this advantaged position of starting as the world's largest copper producer. We've got great growth options ahead of us. One of them right here in the U.S., in fact, in Arizona. And this has had a lot of support from President Trump, Secretary Burgum, and the administration to try to get that project going. Because if we get that project up and running, it can supply 25% of the U.S.'s copper demand for decades to come. It's in joint venture with another company. But we're pretty excited about the outlook for copper and specifically here in the U.S. for this growth option that we have.
And where does that's the Resolution mine in
That's
Arizona.
the Resolution mine, yeah.
So where does it exactly stand? Because I know it is sort of stalled, was stuck, and maybe not anymore.
So it's progressing.
Yeah.
It's been through a series of court challenges, but we've been successful in a number of those. Few challenges yet to be resolved. We're hopeful that those get resolved in short order, because once they're resolved, then we can undertake a pretty significant campaign to better understand the resource, and that's hundreds of millions of dollars, all leading up to potentially a $10 billion plus investment decision in this mine that could be so important to the U.S.'s critical mineral supply chain security when it comes to copper.
All right, you hit that topic, critical mineral supply chain, governments wanting to make sure that they kind of secure those resources for the long period of time. How do you fit into that, right? You have a lot of these sort of more specialized mining companies. The government has either taken a stake or kind of endorsed them one way or another.
So, look, at the end of the day, it's going to be a multifaceted solution, I think. And there's certainly a very important role for companies like BHP to play in that, because copper deposits are becoming harder to find. When they do get found, they're oftentimes more difficult to develop, more costly. And so companies like BHP that have scale, strong balance sheets, a lot of technical depth are best able to bring some of these projects forward. And so we're out there engaging, trying to advocate for good policy, looking for whether there may be opportunities for us to bring new mines on. And then we're working with governments and other stakeholders to do that as quickly as possible. Because one of the challenges to addressing this supply deficit and the weaknesses in critical mineral supply chains is the permitting process. And it takes a long time to get a new mine or a new processing facility up and running here in the U.S. And so part of the administration's effort is to cut through that and make it speedier and less risky to get new things up and running here.
Is it good policy, though, for the administration to take stakes in some of these companies, some of these small miners? This
is such a complex problem to solve for, and it's going to take many years. And so I think what we see is the government trying to recognize the problem, which I think is a very important first step. And then they're looking at the myriad of levers that they can pull to get the ball rolling here. Now, a fundamental lever has to be permitting reform, but you can see why they're looking to stimulate some of these investments through small equity stakes and so on as well.
But
at the end of the day, there's no silver bullet.
Do you want a government investment in BHP?
So
Thanks, you've got deep enough
BHP is
pockets.
big enough, and we start from the principled position of where we can do things on our own. We're willing to back ourselves, draw in private capital to get these things up and running. So we have, as BHP, we haven't been in a position of needing to go out there and secure these.
But is it frustrating to see your competitors getting these, I guess? Is it a place you think that the government should be involved because of the national security impacts of the country? Or is it a place you think the government should stay out of because they're not very good at picking winners?
So I would say we recognize that it's a reality of the world that we find ourselves in, where people have finally woken up to the need, the growing demand for some of these commodities, the risk that they don't come on in a timely fashion or for other reasons critical mineral supply chains get disrupted, and they're moving at pace to try to fill that gap or address that problem. And so I understand why the government here in the U.S., and you see the same thing happening in other countries around the world, are deploying the various measures that they have available to them. Of course, we would love to see a situation in which a company like BHP, with the reputation that we have, the capabilities and the balance sheet that we have, can progress projects faster and more sure-footedly than the competition.
So we have the demand side seems pretty firm, supplies challenged based on all the complexity, and then we have tariffs on top of that. So how does that collide with your business?
So yet another measure that you can see governments deploying to try to stimulate more inbound investment, in this case into the U.S., but the other governments will be deploying similar or alternative measures. Again, it's a reflection of the reality of the world today. One of the things that I've advocated for is that if tariffs are going to be put in place, the more that they can be done legislatively, the more likely it is to translate into big new investments, because these investments are $5 billion, $10 billion, $15 billion, and you need certainty over an extended time frame. Now, I understand that that's easier said than done at times. I think the tariffs that have been put in place here have been symbolically significant, because they're representative of the level of support and focus that you see from the top on down currently in the U.S. administration to addressing this critical supply chain conundrum.
Mm-hmm. What's the current trajectory of China demand for resources? Every time I watch the price action, it's one of these stories that's like, well, that's China hoarding copper or gasoline or something.
No, look, you see strong underlying economic growth continuing in China. A little bit stronger in the first half, as tailed off a bit in the third quarter. But expectations are still that they're going to hit their 5% growth target for this year. And in particular, the segments of the economy that are performing well, infrastructure, for example, machinery, these are pretty metals intensive. So the underlying demand for steel, therefore iron ore, for copper, for building out some of the power infrastructure there, that demand remains very healthy in China. And
what about, we've been talking about gold.
Yes.
Obviously it's kind of quasi-money. It's not just a metal. But are you a participant in that area? Does it kind of change where people are putting capital to mine?
So gold is seen as a bit of a different segment in the mining sector than a company like BHP. We don't specifically chase after gold as a division within BHP or for growth. But as it happens, because gold is a byproduct of our copper production, we're a top 20 global gold producer. So it's a commodity that, of course, we pay attention to. The run-up in gold prices has benefited our copper assets because, of course, it boosts revenue there. But it's not a commodity that we've chosen specifically to grow on. Our growth commodities are copper and potash up in Canada. We're not currently a potash producer, but we're investing upwards of $12 billion US currently in Canada to become one of the world's largest potash producers from 2027 onwards.